All right, welcome back, everybody. We are continuing this character construction and design pathway. So I just have a couple extra 3D prints here that were little prototypes of failed prints. This one, the Mushroom Queen, I had done and was experimenting with how thin I could do like fingers and really like skinny legs, wrists and ankles, things like that. And it's also something I could maybe sculpt on and work out some other prototypes. And then here's one of the original Mush characters. And so we'll take a look at what these 3D models are looking like. Currently, we are going to do 3D model sheet construction sheets, 3D model construction sheets. There's 3D model sheets for animation, which is for animators to be able to construct using solid 3D shape geometry, but in a 2D format. So there's two types of 3D model sheets. And this one in particular is going to build a real world maquette. And so I had this like little doodles and sketches of this character has evolved. You saw in the earlier videos and lessons that I experimented and explored many different shapes, silhouette, gesture, and whatnot. And so we're going to go through some of these specifics and look at the resources that have been given to you. So I've given you a Vitruvian woman, we'll call it. So most of the literature, traditional fine arts for anatomy is almost completely male. So what I've really tried to focus on is giving more female anatomy, female écorché, body types, a little more like heroic athletic build. A pose, T pose, arms up, arms down. We still have resources for the front, side, back. And at the next step of this process, we're going to start getting into digital. So I'm going to show you some basics on digital sculpture with the free apps that are out there. I'll also show you the least expensive ones that are really useful, such as Nomad Sculpt. The free version of that is SculptGL, which is a browser-based software that's free, totally free. It works great. Sculptress, which is owned now by Maxon, Pixelot, or ZBrush, which is still available. So really, you can make anything with almost entirely free software. You don't even need Maya anymore. You just use Blender. That's what a lot of my students are doing. And we're going to look at doing a little bit more of constructed solid shapes. So these are lessons. I forget the name of this book. I should remember off the top of my head. But doing bends and overlapping forms, creating that crease, that overlapping arc, the law of overlapping shapes for identifying which shape is in front of the other, and then doing like light dotted line work around it. So that's really trying to get form to your characters. Once we are past this step, then we can get into the actual maquette model making process. So I will scan these for you as well. So I was looking, watching the Stan Winston School, had an older video for toy design, which is definitely dated now. So the technology's changed a lot. That's why I wanted to kind of highlight, the awesomeness of having a 3D printer to feel your digital creations in your hands and study like, light and silhouette and the value change of form on the plane surfaces, texture and pattern and things like that. You can see I didn't clean the top of that one up yet, but um, it's okay. So this particular one we're doing is like for a midterm assignment is a 12-inch tall character. So again, this is just a basic female anatomy model that's been measured out. So you'll see there's this is 12 inches, which is 1/6 scale, just to keep the math simple. I know it's a little tall, but I always want to mark what the units are when I'm doing these. So these are head heights for this particular assignment or for this particular type of construction, doing a 1/6 scale model. I should have these. Yeah, mine are 1.5 inches equals one head height, looks like. So going down on these squares, this particular one is right at 8. See the pelvis is just a tiny bit lower. And then I have one arm out. I could always tape some paper if you need to have the pose going off the side of the paper. You don't have to buy a big giant sheet of paper. Just get some tape and cut the paper up and assemble it. And then we're going to go through the wire and then make sure we clearly note where the dots are for the joints. in here. So this is a physical armature we're going to build out of aluminum armature wire. The next phase is really going to be exciting after we do the digital sculpts is to rig them up in Mixamo if it's still free, if Adobe hasn't changed their, they're charging for everything now. But we're also going to use the new free rigging, animation, and sculpting texturing program called Masterpiece VR. So we're going to get into virtual reality. At the end of this process, we're going to take this whole construction process and we're going to we're going to paint it. We'll paint both the traditional sculpture. We'll also do the digital paint and texture, do the shader materials and whatnot. Then we get into Unreal Engine, and we'll do Unreal Engine 4 as well as Unreal Engine 5. And so it's going to be a complete process, and then we'll do a model kit for the construction of the virtual world and level design, map layout, and then to finish it off, we'll do the actual interaction and game design. So here's a example that the dark elf, the Doke Alfer, kind of a Nordic style, dark elf style. So you'll see in here a couple things to note. First off, the feet, the heel is not flat on the floor, right? So for the other one, you can see here, the feet are flat on the floor. They have like a little wedge shape coming out, and then the foot is put off to the side. That's so you can measure where the heel is touching the ground and where the foot goes off to the side. So this is something that when I did this first one many, many years ago, that I was kind to detail out the foot a bit, but then realized that I needed to draw that from a strict side view. So you could do that in an overlay. You could do that over with tracing paper. I have that somewhere. I forget exactly where. And then the other thing I wanted to note here is the change in the length of the arms, or I'm sorry, the legs. So when the legs are out in A pose, that little bit bringing them in to a upright pose is going to change the height a little bit. Also, when you're measuring the neck, we have a forward neck lean that's really slight. That can also, if you don't bend the wire and make the neck a little longer, that can shorten your neck and kind of give you these little shruggy positions. The other thing that's really important to note is that when you do T-pose, when you lift your arms up, you can measure, put your hands at the top where your arm is at, and then bring your arm back down, and you can measure a full, usually, set of 2 inches ish of shoulder raise, which for a lot of beginners, if you do your character in T-pose, you're going to get that shrugged shoulder, shortened neck effect. So your characters are going to run around and animated really funny, and it's also going to so every little fraction, like 16th, eighth of an inch, quarter of an inch on these 1 foot tall uh, pieces at least, but all this stuff adds up. It'll really throw off your anatomy and throw off your pose if you're not aware of the shoulder T pose, for you to go from A pose to T pose, and making sure that when you cut your armature wire, you want to have extra length loops for the hands. You also want to have extra length for the feet. And I use a lot of tracing paper and vellum, and um, I really experimented with materials because that Photoshop's great. I love Photoshop, but it is expensive especially for students. And the layering and tracing paper, once you realize, like with these different animation pencils, really light, nice, light fast red, light fast blue, merged together to make a beautiful deep purple that shows up well. So it lets you explore shape. So I'll have usually do the body in one color, and then when I start exploring the costume more, I'll usually do the costume overlay in a different color. And so this is the first one, so I'll show you that in the older one. This is a bit clear, a bit more of a clear graphic here that shows where on the gray spheres here, the head height, this is 9, should be a little over 8 head heights. Doesn't seem accurate. I think I might have just barely mismeasured. I don't know. But, so you have a checklist that's been provided. So what I can do is go through this model sheet checklist that I've been working on for everybody. And so in the 2D phases, we had you really focusing on working out the drawing issues, perspective, volume, staging. We're going through the gesture. We're going through the silhouette studies, and we're trying to get a consistent look, but we're having you really explore design and come in with a unique character that's not just a rehash of your favorite like existing IP or fan art, something like that. And now we're trying to look at more advanced, like defining the character, the poses, make sure we got really good poses, making sure you're doing good overlapping shapes, working on your line weight. And then when we get into these orthographic model sheets, you want those chibi head poses to be defined as well. So the on the handout we were here last, this is where we left off, which was doing speed sculpts in monster clay. So this was exploring the whole universe of these myconid creatures, right? So here we go. So here's the movement gesture, first pass going from cute to creepy, um, line of action, the spine, the weight, the position of them. What are some of the emotions? You know, happy, sad, angry, disgust, surprise, fear. What are the different head heights? And then now we're getting to the actual construction phase. We're going to go and look at how we cut these up. So these are myconids, mushroom people. So definitely keeping the cap of the mushroom as a almost like an accessory, like a cap, like a hat, baseball cap. But it is part of their anatomy. But when I construct it, I want to treat it differently because it is such a huge piece compared to the rest of the body. So especially with this character, you can see it's almost like sombrero, giant flying saucer disc, which is going to be part of his movement and animation. That the cap I'm going to kind of remove. So we're going to work out this little sketch that you saw a moment ago and begin the final steps here of laying out a construction sheet and going from Photoshop. So I went ahead and brought it into Photoshop. I measured out the head heights. And with the head, as I mentioned from the way the cap works, I went ahead and removed the cap entirely. So I have an extra cutout here. Now, you don't have to do this much work. I'm just kind of did this to have good quality resources for you all to try out and or to see how an actual demo would work. And so I might make this cap. So the assignment was to make it 1 foot tall, right? So clearly this guy is not a foot tall. He's only, but remember, I have to go to the bottom of the heel here, right? Not the front of the foot. So I got to redraw that out sideways like I did here in this drawing, right? So I want to bring that foot out flat. But for design purposes, I went ahead and drew a little bit of perspective into the foot. So remember to measure from the bottom of the heel up. And I'm going to call the top of his head right about here-ish. So at this point, time to get out good old wax pencil here and kind of define where I see a head-ish region. Now this is really for construction purposes. If I wanted to use the same body, maybe morph target it, maybe swell it out, make him a heavy version, a younger version, an older version, things like that, and maybe swap the cap out. I can make a whole different cast of characters with the same body and maybe swap out the cap. But the cap is going to be part of his anatomy, but for construction purposes, the cap I'm going to make a disc out of foam core. So I have these light foam core pieces you can see here that I'm using for the papers to show up better on camera. But I'm going to actually cut a disc of foam core about the size of this cap here. I'm going to go in a little bit more so that way I could put the layer of the monster clay on it and put that on there. So let's see here. I wanted to pause this. Can I pause this?